Choose a game that displays emergent play. Select a form of emergent play within the game, describe the actions, and explain how they are emergent. How does this form of play improve the game? Skyrim. Now I know this is an easy choice, but I believe that many developers can learn from how Bethesda designs their games to foster emergence. One example of intentional emergence is the second downloadable content in the form of Hearthfire. Hearthfire's expansion created a few plots of land in the game world that the player can visit. On these plots, players can buy materials, plans, and work to create a full mansion, complete with all the crafting stations within the game. And just like any other house, Skyrim allows to fully manipulate nearly every object in the game. This allows for full player choice and engagement on, well, decorating. Now, what's more emergent than creating your own house the way you want is if a player wants to have 10,000 swords in their house. They can and will. In addition, Skyrim allows you to have followers, where you can go to all parts of the world, have someone follow you, and bring them to your house and have them stay there. If you wanted them to take almost all the followers in the world and have them in your house to have a party with your 10,000 swords, you can. This has nothing to do with the game's plot or narration, but because Bethesda created many rules and forms of interactivity between the in-game elements, it can lead to these weird emergent moments. In addition, sometimes you can come across battles, across factions in the world as random encounters. After building your mansion, sometimes those battles happen at your brand new doorstep, and now you'd have to defend your newly created mansion. Why is this emergent? Well, none of this is integral to the actual main progression of the story. All of these situations may be intentional by the developers, but not necessarily to happen all at once. By giving players the massive amount of options and choices to create emergent moments, like having a random battle happen at your doorstep or a 10,000 sword party, it deepens the relationship the player has with the vast world and increases the immersion within the game. Discuss hex editing and the effect that it has on the player community and the developer. Discuss hex editing from the perspective of the editor. What is your position on hex editing? Hex editing is the modern-day version of the Konami code. Instead of pressing a series of cheat codes via button inputs, you can break open the game files and edit them to give yourself invulnerability, extra money in-game, etc. This creates unintended emergence where the players can have fun with in-game situations that the developers didn't expect. Currently, developers encrypt these files in an effort to prevent hex editing, whereas the editors out there continue to find new ways to figure out how to break this encryption. The developer is in sort of a rat race with editors to encrypt the game's files once editors find a way to break the previous encryption. The issue with hex editing is twofold for the developers. One, it can break the game. Developers have one way they wanted to present their game, and they wanted to do it in a specific style, manner, and difficulty. For example, hex editing can edit save games to place the player ahead of a difficult area without having to experience or traverse it. This creates unintended emergence, yes, but it can break the experience the developers were trying to create. The second problem for developers is sometimes information about an upcoming patch, downloadable content, or even a sequel embedded in the game's code or files. Hex editors have been known to uncover this information and give it to the gaming press to leak it to the public. For example, in 2012, code was found in Skyrim regarding rideable dragons, which later came out in downloadable content in which you can ride a dragon. In 2013, someone found code in Battlefield 4 indicating new upcoming game modes for multiplayer. For developers, they may want to keep all this information tightly wrapped until they can make their timely announcements. From the perspective of the editor, perhaps it's about the freedom of information. Similar to the debate about player choice, the editors want the player to have the choice of having infinite money or teleporting as a cheat if not readily available or implemented by the developers. For myself, I agree with the notion of player choice, but I side with the developers when they want to release a product that has been packaged to their vision. I don't agree with this unintended emergence through hex editing. Real unintended emergence should be gained through where the developer has failed to quality control, for example, exploiting a bug that's in the game. If the developer doesn't want you as the player to have the ability to have infinite ammo or health, for example, then that is their vision and should be retained as such. Some developers have created a very closed progressive story that they don't want skipped, else ruining the experience. I support the developers on topics such as these. On the flip side, some developers prevent players from having to change their field of vision, create colorblind friendly modes, change the input maps for players who may have disabilities, or even control the frames per second. In those cases, I would support hex editing. What are some of the ways you can show a player that emergent play is possible? There are many ways you can show the possibility of emergence to a player. Some games may differ from others, and that may affect how difficult it is to show how emergent a game can be. Most notable example I can give is through in-game objectives, for example. If an objective says, go to point A to get item X and use it on car Y, there's not going to be room for emergence for the most part. Alternatively, if you were to give a player the objective, you are at point A, find a way to get item X, where item X is at point Z. In that example, the game can give all sorts of options for traversal and tools for dealing with certain situations that can lead to emergent moments. If the player has to investigate or use the tools the developer provided to figure out a way to complete the objectives themselves, it can demonstrate that emergent play is possible. For example, in Metal Gear Solid 5, you can complete a side activity with extracting information from someone that is being held captive. This can be accomplished through various means. You can use stealth to quietly extract the captive out through helicopter, or you can go in loud, guns blazing, and interrogate the captive. Both options complete the objective, but the player has choice on how to complete it. Both choices can inevitably end up forcing the player to adapt to the other. For example, if the player was discovered while attempting to use stealth, they have various other tools to allow them to defend themselves and still complete the objective. The same value for player choice can be applied to creating emergence within progressive games. For example, let's imagine you had a linear first-person horror game where stealth was critical and you needed to get into a locked drawer. You have been given a crowbar where you can loudly break open the drawer, leading the nearby enemies to you and having to run away, or you can search around for a key to quietly unlock the drawer and progress without alerting anyone. The player now has the choice on how to interact with this object or obstacle. Progressive and linear games are sometimes limited in their capacity to provide emergence, as this example is not as emergent as some that can be done and have been found with more open-ended non-linear games. It's the designer's responsibility to organically show the choices, to make it appear as if the player is the one making the choices that can lead to these emergent moments. If the player is given choice without explicitly saying what the consequences are, this can lead to great emergent moments, provided that the developer has provided rules to all choices and the tools for the player to have fun in any situation, regardless of outcome. Even if it's the illusion of choice, giving players a high level of interactivity and freedom can lead to great emergent moments.